in an attempt to silence me. Why can't you be as calm and polite as Nikki? All you know how to do is complain.
If you're so unhappy in this family, leave. Anyway, you don't contribute much to the household. You're more of a hindrance.
The problem began with threats to refuse to pay for my university expenses and ended with my parents kicking me out of the house as soon as I turned 18. It was a terrible time for me. With nowhere to go and not enough money to sustain myself, I had to rely on all my ingenuity to avoid ending up on the streets. I don't think I come from a dysfunctional family, or at least I didn't think so when I was little. My family always treated me well, providing me with all the love and care necessary despite never being in the best economic situation. And indeed, that's how it continued during the first years of my life, in a practically idyllic harmony where, although I was never the favored one at home, they never denied me basic attention. Everything began to change, without me even realizing it, when my brother Nicky was born.
Now that you're going to become a big brother, you'll have to take on more responsibilities and help us always ensure his well-being. Understood?
My father stated this with pride, thus passing on his own excitement about having a new member in the family to me. And although at first I didn't understand why everyone was so excited, soon the reason why all the adults around me were so thrilled became clear. This is something I learned many years later, well into adolescence, but my own birth was not planned. Rather, it was the result of a careless night of partying and drunkenness. There was nothing wrong with it. Or, better said, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it at that time. But many things that I considered as unchangeable truths in my early youth would soon be shaken. Nicky turned out to be the perfect child in my parents' eyes, not only because of his beauty, but also because of his friendly character and all the successes he seemed destined to achieve from a very young age. Not only my parents, but everyone who knew him didn't hesitate to shower him with compliments, praising him for his good looks and his good behavior. Soon, the comparisons began.
Caleb, why can't you be a bit more like your brother? Look how sociable he is. They've barely met the neighbor's son and they're already playing as if they've been friends for a lifetime.
But Mom, he's 3 years old. Anyone who approaches you at 3 years old, you consider them your friend.
Not only should you be more sociable, but also improve your grades. Who goes to 3rd grade and doesn't have an A in all subjects? Surely Nicky could do better. He can already read and do sums. He's way ahead of his peers.
He actually only knows a few letters and can count to 10.
Jealousy is a very bad thing, son. It corrodes the soul.
Perhaps my mother was right, and feeling jealous was a waste of time. But my relatives did nothing to prevent me from feeling overshadowed by my younger brother. On the contrary, whenever Nicky did something even remotely praiseworthy, no matter how routine or irrelevant it seemed to me, they found a way to turn it into a commendable feat. The comparisons became a daily occurrence. At first, they were minor things like, why can't you clean your room as neatly as your brother? Or, you need to dress better. You have enough decent clothes not to go around looking like a vagabond. Look at your brother, always so handsome. But gradually, as the years passed, they escalated. And they not only criticized me for things I did wrong, but also used the things I did well to reproach me for not doing better.
Don't let it get to your head. I'm not that good, and you're not that bad.
That's hard to believe when every moment of the day they make sure to remind me otherwise, as if instead of having 2 children, they only had 1. And the remaining teenager was just a random person they had to deal with out of obligation, never out of personal affection.
Do you want me to talk to them?
If you could do me that favor, they'll listen to you for sure. They always listened to Nicky, no matter what he said. So it was a surprise to discover that this turned out to be the exception that proved the rule. Nicky, who did try to fulfill the promise he had made to me and convince my parents to treat me better, was completely ignored when he brought up the issue. Not only did our parents change the subject as soon as either of us tried to call their attention to it, but once they got tired of giving us the runaround, they flat out told us that we were imagining things and that they loved us both equally. If they were stricter with me, to the point of giving me more chores at home than I deserved, it was only because they wanted the best for me and knew I could strive for more. They indulged Nicky in everything, giving him gifts and sparing him responsibilities, while burdening me with more work and reproaches that often had no basis. Why can't I sign up for guitar classes? I've gotten excellent grades in all my subjects, as we agreed I would.
There isn't enough money. Besides, why would you do extracurricular activities? That's a waste of time. You have things to do at home.
But the classes are free. The school provides them, and they even lend the instruments themselves.
Your father already told you no, you don't have time for those nonsense activities.
The curious thing was that there was always time and money to waste for Nikki. As soon as he showed interest in an activity, no matter how impractical it was, my parents went out of their way to make sure he could attend. And Nikki wasn't a bad person. He had shown that on numerous occasions when he tried to help me get a fairer deal. But he wasn't the perfect being. Everyone claimed he was either. My brother was too impulsive and indecisive. The activity that brought him pleasure today could hold zero interest for him the following week. It was inconvenient for me, but my parents seemed unfazed, blinded as they were by the halo of splendor they saw in Nikki. Needless to say, they didn't demand the perfect scores from him that they expected from me. At first, when I was very young, I tolerated this. But as I grew up and realized that instead of changing, the situation was escalating, my complaints became more constant, to the point that my parents were forced to confront me and punish me more often in an attempt to silence me.
Why can't you be as calm and polite as Nikki? All you know how to do is complain.
If you're so unhappy in this family, leave. Anyway, you don't contribute much to the household. You're more of a hindrance.
The problem began with threats to refuse to pay for my university expenses and ended with my parents kicking me out of the house as soon as I turned 18. It was a terrible time for me. With nowhere to go and not enough money to sustain myself, I had to rely on all my ingenuity to avoid ending up on the streets. I survived thanks to the kindness of some friends who let me stay in their home until I could afford an apartment. I abandoned my educational opportunities in favor of getting a job to survive. And yes, after a few years, I managed to stabilize and start a new life away from parents who rejected me shamelessly. I lost contact with them, although I still occasionally spoke to Nikki, as he was the only one who still cared about me and even sent me some money in those first few months when I struggled to save enough to support myself.
Our parents are in debt. They're trying to hide it from me, so I don't worry, but I know what's going on. I'm not blind.
Let them dig themselves out of the hole on their own. They're old enough to know how to spend their meager fortune.
You know very well that they waste too much, and their carpentry business is about to collapse. Couldn't you lend them a hand now that you're doing well?
Why would I help them after everything they did to me? You helped them, since they treated you so well. Nikki did want to help, but contrary to what our relatives predicted, things weren't going so well for him in life. At 20, he had dropped out of university to take a gap year traveling around Europe, which my parents funded without sparing any expenses. And now that he was back in the country, he had taken on a part-time job at a fast food chain that obviously didn't pay very well. As for me, I had managed to stabilize my life and resume my studies. I got a job at a veterinary clinic, which provided me with a good salary and even allowed me to save some money. I had no interest in getting involved with my parents again, so I wished Nikki luck and completely washed my hands of the matter. It was several months later when I found out that my parents' financial problems had escalated to the point where they were about to have their car and house repossessed. The police had already knocked on their door, and from what I could gather, they were also being investigated for fraud.
It's all a mistake, Caleb. You must help us. We didn't realize the debts had piled up so much, and we needed the money to give you and Nikki a better future.
Only to Nikki, rather. And yet I can see that you've squandered a lot on indulgences for yourselves.
Don't be like that. We did everything we could to give you a good childhood. It's just that you were always a very rebellious child, always demanding more than we could give.
My parents begged for help, but beyond offering some advice, I didn't extend a helping hand. Everything I had built from the age of 18 until that moment was the result of my own efforts, and I wasn't going to let anyone convince me otherwise. However, other people weren't so forgiving. As it turned out, my parents had borrowed a great deal of money from people they knew and refused to pay them back. Some of those people were their customers or suppliers, and they owed tens of thousands of dollars to many of them. Some were so angry that they even spray painted the words "liar" on the side of my parents' house. On top of that, their home was broken into several times, and much of their belongings were stolen. Even their cars were broken into and stolen. For me, though, I never considered seeking revenge as such. However, things for my parents finally crossed the point of no return when they were finally arrested for embezzlement. After the police took them away, a local newspaper contacted me to interview me about them and my childhood. It may not have been my intention to publicly humiliate them, but by telling the truth about how they kicked me out of the house, that's exactly what happened. As for Nikki, well, I made sure to take care of him, and he moved in with me. In the end, I went from being a pariah, rejected by my own parents, to having free access to the family properties again and being seen almost as a hero in the media, while my parents had to serve a long sentence. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.